And joining us on the line right now is Ed Henry, White House correspondent for your Fox News channel. Good morning to you, Ed.
Good morning, Brian. I'm glad your voice is back.
Thank you.
Last time Larry was flying solo.
I was a little croaky the last time. Thank you very much for that. Hey, listen, Ed, how angry is the Obama administration at Benjamin Netanyahu for giving this address today, 11 a.m., to the House and Senate?
Well, I think they have been pretty angry and probably still are, but I've been fascinated by the last 24, 48 hours. I think I'm seeing a bit of a shift in the administration trying to be a little bit more diplomatic, and I don't know if that means that they think they overshot it a little bit with Susan Rice's comments last week suggesting that this whole trip was going to be, quote-unquote, destructive to the U.S.-Israeli relationship. And when I say, sort of walk back and be more diplomatic, I mean, it kind of started with Secretary of State Kerry on ABC Sunday saying, well, the Prime Minister, he has the right to speak anywhere, anytime, which, as you know, is not something the administration was saying last week. Then the President did that interview late yesterday with Reuters and basically said, we can get along and we can work this out. And it was interesting that he took Susan Rice's phrase and said, this is not permanently destructive. So
it's not permanently destructive.
So it's a language thing, right?
But is it because he's reading the polls, or is it because they really fear what Netanyahu might do at that podium today?
Well, you know what I think is interesting, inherent in your question is we've all, whether it's folks in the media, whether it's Democrats on the Hill, Republicans on the Hill, the White House, the Israeli government, there's been a lot of focus on the invite from Speaker Boehner and should he speak, should he not speak. Not enough people are focusing on the real substance of what I think Netanyahu is going to talk about, which is Iran getting closer to getting nuclear weapons? Is this nuclear deal that the U.S. may be wrapping up by the end of the month going to make the world less or more safe? The White House obviously makes the case that it's going to make Israel in particular more safe. And the Prime Minister, who probably knows more about Israeli safety than you or I or the President, perhaps, doesn't believe this deal will help. So let's hear him.
I don't want to be conspiratorial here, but I mean, it seems to me that the change in tone and tenor from this administration came right after this story, which they have knocked down, that said that at one point the Israelis wanted to attack the nuclear facilities in Iran, and they were told, if you do that, we will stand in your way. We'll even shoot down Israeli jets that move across. I mean, they've shot that story down, but it was right then that their whole tone and tenor changed.
Interesting. I pressed Josh Earnest on that yesterday. He said that it was just a rumor. It wasn't true. So then I asked him, okay, so are you saying that the President leaves the military option against Iran on the table, which he has throughout the last 6 years? George W. Bush, as you know, left that option on the table, never used it, but left it on the table for Iran as well. That's something American presidents do. Does the Israeli Prime Minister have that right? And Josh Earnest basically said yes, but as allies they should consult with us. So a little bit of a caveat in there. So you're right that story, the White House insists it's not true, but the timing of that leaking over the weekend also coincided. You're right. You can't prove that changed anything because the White House insists it's just a rumor, but it certainly sort of all of a sudden we heard the White House saying, we can work this out.
Yeah.
He has a right to speak. And so everyone will finally hear him today.
Well, and Ed, you said right at the beginning that maybe the administration sort of overshot it a little bit. And I wonder if they're thinking, geez, we may have overplayed our hand a bit on this thing because it's now become this sort of churlish, you've insulted the president issue and making it personal about him. Benjamin Netanyahu is a very good speaker. We saw yesterday he has a flair for the rhetoric. When the American people actually see this quote-unquote controversial speech today, I think most of them are going to say, what's wrong with this? He said some things that we tend to agree with.
Right. Now, on the other hand, I think the administration has, behind the scenes and then a little bit in Susan Rice and others, Samantha Power, the U.S. ambassador of the UN, spoke at AIPAC as well yesterday, and they at least alluded to the fact that there have been previous claims by the Israeli Prime Minister where, he has said Iran is this close to nuclear weapons, and that didn't turn out to be true. So they're going to push back on him, if you will.
Yeah.
But by the same token, you're absolutely right that he is somebody who makes a compelling case about the threat from Iran. We've seen him do that in other forums, like the United Nations General Assembly before, and capture the world's attention. And so I think he is getting this on the radar. And this White House, in the words of John McCain yesterday, he told Fox, look, and he's obviously a Republican critic of the president, but he said that the reason why, in his words, Susan Rice was hysterical about this speech last week is that the administration is afraid that Netanyahu, on the substance, is going to pick apart this deal with Iran that the president wants to jam through for his legacy. And that's the real issue, that the administration is worried that Netanyahu is really going to spike this deal.
Our guest is Ed Henry, Fox News chief White House correspondent, and I have to ask you about something else that was brought up yesterday in the briefing room, and that is this idea that Senator Sanders of Vermont has sort of floated, that the president could use that famous pen and phone through executive action to raise taxes or increase taxes or close loopholes. What exactly is he contemplating, and have they cited any precedent of an executive doing this in the past?
Well, not on taxes, but Josh Earnest did leave the door wide open for that, and I think that is obviously going to alarm Republicans, or currently sort of twisted in a pretzel over what to do over the Department of Homeland Security funding moving forward, which everyone sort of forgets now because it's become a fight about Homeland Security, but that started out as a fight to try and stop the president's executive actions on immigration. Now Josh Earnest yesterday left the door open to executive actions on taxes. And by the way, we can bring it back to Israel and the Iran deal, because I thought you were going to ask me about, Josh Earnest has also left the door open to the president using executive action to get this deal with Iran through, by the way.
Yeah.
And what I find fascinating, it might not just be Republicans on the Hill who would, like Bob Corker, who will want to stop them. Last night, pay attention to what Bob Menendez, the former Democratic chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate before Democrats lost control of the Senate, he said, last night, I will not be intimidated by anyone in trying to continue to move forward with sanctions on Iran and giving the Senate the power to ratify any deal with Iran. Significant. He's a Democrat who basically said, I'm not going to be intimidated by a Democratic president. That's something the White House
That is, and it's very interesting considering he feels personally stung over the unilateral action on Cuba when he was not brought into it, when it was such a major issue for him. That's a great point.
Yeah, listen, there's another story percolating this morning. It's not White House, but about a former resident of the White House, Hillary Clinton. Apparently, she never had a State Department mail account, and that all of her email correspondence was done through a private account. Why is this important? Well, because now, as we're trying to figure out what happened in Benghazi, et cetera, blah, 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 when we go and we say we want to see your emails, she is in control of deciding which emails we see and which we do not see.
This could be a big deal. I mean, before I came on with you, I was flipping around the different morning shows and the Today Show, which sometimes can be a little more friendly to the former Secretary of State. Their lead story, that Chiron said Hillary Clinton email scandal was the word. Scandal.
Scandal, wow.
And so this is something that might knock her back a little bit, because you're right. Federal regulations and law, you have to archive these emails, because if you're doing government work over email, it has to be from your official account. Those are the regulations. Now, interesting, because I remember this coming up when I covered the Bush White House, and Karl Rove was accused of doing a lot of business through a private account that he had maintained with the RNC and others for political work, and the Democrats were accusing Karl Rove, we should point out, of doing the very same thing. He pushed back on it, and there was a big fight. But the bottom line is, that was an accusation that Karl Rove mixed official email and RNC Republican email. This allegation, as Larry said, it was that Hillary Clinton only had private email and didn't use official email. Was she hiding anything?
Yeah.
That's going to be question number one. Number two, if you're using, say, Gmail or something and not an official government account, it might be more susceptible to hackers. Sensitive information could get out there.
Sure.
So all of this is fascinating. And at the start, Brian, you said not really a White House story. You're right. But on the other hand, if she does become a candidate, I find it fascinating that in recent months there's been this rapprochement where, it appears the president is liking more and more the idea of Hillary Clinton trying to succeed him. All of these things, like this email issue, the Clinton Foundation raising money from foreign governments against the White House set up ethics rules, these issues are going to start coming up for the White House.
I think you're right.
He was their Secretary of State.
All right, Ed Henry.
We'll
always good to have you,
That's
sir.
good stuff. Thanks,
the
Ed.
always dapper and fellow Voltaggio foodie, Ed Henry.
I saw you there the other night at the range.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ed.